Close the door behind you. You're now in the green room.
So are you just doing this out of the goodness of your heart, or are you earning money now, or is there some kind of sponsorship going on?
I started this because I love music, right? I started this because it's fun, and I enjoy discovering talent, and I enjoy the people that I feature. But we want to continue to grow, right? We want to expand, and one of the things that we're starting to do is we have merchandise. So we have the Caribbean Cadence logo and brand, and we're looking to begin marketing that, and we're going to use those funds to, give instruments and start to provide instruments to young men in the region and young women.
Excellent.
And also see how far this platform goes. It's showing promise.
We need to do more of that. I mean, Caribbean music needs to be celebrated and promoted as much as we possibly can. And as you're quite right saying, the musicians as well, because what we tend to do a lot in the Caribbean is focus on singers, and we don't always recognize how important the musicians are, the instrumentalists are, and how crucial they have been to the development of the sound that we call the Caribbean sound, So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would like to take that last part of what you just said and put that in the episode, if you don't mind.
Yeah, don't mind. As you ready, let's go.
All right. So hello and welcome, everybody. You just heard the words of the great Nicholas Brancker here of the Nicholas Brancker Band, as you saw featured at the top of this episode. And I'm privileged tonight to be sitting in with him in this special episode of The Green Room. We're going to be, speaking a little bit about his story and a little bit about Caribbean music.
This is going to be fun. Looking forward to this.
Yes, sir. So just for the people who are joining us right now, who may not know you too well, can you give us just an introduction to yourself?
Okay. Well, my name is Nicholas Brancker. I am a musician / producer from Barbados. I have been in music professionally now for longer than I would care to admit. I have always been juggling my instrumental performances and development with my production, development and projects. I have worked primarily in the Caribbean with soca artists, largely from Barbados, but from all over the region as well. So the artists that you may know that I have worked with will be people like Allison Hinds and Square One, Edwin Yearwood and Crossfire, Rupee. I worked with Kevin Little as well, worked with Marshall, David Rudder, pretty much everybody who is anybody in this part of the world I've worked with. But I've also done a lot of playing as a musician. So on stage, I am a bass player / keyboard player, but I don't play as much keyboards as I used to. So I'm primarily a bass player. And I play in bands, and I also have my own band. And we've traveled the world, played jazz festivals all over. I've also played with a number of international artists in different configurations. I worked with Eddie Grant for a long time as his bass player. Then I also have worked with bands I worked with Maxi Priest and Simply Red, and I was Roberta Flack's bass player for like 12 years. So I've been doing a lot of different things. Now I'm focused on trying to develop a more rounded approach to what I think Caribbean music is or can be, because I've always felt, but because of the vagaries of the profession and the kind of commitments that I had, I've always felt that we could kind of broaden our sphere of expression, because a lot of what we make fits into very specific categories.
All right.
And I have always felt that a lot of the full gamut of emotions that Caribbean people experience are not easily found in their music. So, for example, when people are getting married or when there's a funeral,
I think I know exactly where you're going.
They lose their loved one or something, like moments of intense emotion.
All right. We
tend to have to go to other genres to find the music that we identify with. And that has always bothered me. You know? I feel like I should be able to research as a historian. I should be able to look through my music, the music from the Caribbean, and trace our emotional development, not just our political development, but our emotional development and our social development. You know? So
that's very profound.
That's a lot of talk. But what I'm trying to say is that I particularly in this pandemic situation here, the last 2 years, where we've had to rethink pretty much not only how we reach our audience, but how we make music at all. You know, we've had to kind of rethink the whole thing on why we're doing it, because, you know, the reasons that you were doing it before don't necessarily mean the same thing. You know, there's a lot of, like, for example, all the carnivals were canceled.
Yeah, no more road budget.
All of those people who would have normally made a particular kind of music found that it was, why, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you find yourself challenged to remain relevant from an emotional point of view, in addition to being just making good music. So the last 2 years have been interesting, challenging, but very interesting for me. And that's what I'm trying to, I think the next 4 or 5 years will be about trying to develop that further.
Okay. And that's very profound. And I definitely want to explore that. But before we dig a little further into the direction that you just mentioned there, because I'm very intrigued by the topic that you opened up there with exploring using Caribbean music to cover the full spectrum of human emotion. But I'm kind of curious as to your origin story. How did you first get on that bass? How did you first touch that keyboard?
I cannot remember a time that I did not have music in my heart. I started when I was like 3 years old. I had a toy piano, a little 2-octave red piano, toy, a very small thing. And I can still remember me picking out melodies off the radio or the record player that my parents had. I was able to work out what the melodies were without knowing the music behind it. And I can't remember a time that I didn't have music in my head or that I did not want to be a musician. So I went to music lessons formally when I was about 6. And I did the full classical Royal Schools of Music thing. I did up to grade 8 on the piano. And then I was also on the side, always trying to develop jazz and pop. You know, I was always trying to learn pop music and jazz. I was very interested in jazz and its harmony and how it, like the improvisational aspect of it.
Right, the creativity.
Because my father was not necessarily, he wasn't a musician, but he was very creative from an improvisational point of view. So he would be listening to songs on the radio and he'd be singing them, but he'd be singing them different. He would always be adding in things. And, you know, and for somebody like me, it was really like liberating. But, you know, I don't ever have to play it the way it was originally done. I could always, you know, have my own take on it. Right. The bass came about later.
By the way, if I just hop in, was your father a singer then? Did he sing?
Well, he wasn't a musician by profession at all, okay. But he was talented.
Okay.
He could sing, but he wasn't a singer, if you understand me.
I get you.
He was a lawyer by profession. But okay. The bass, I had always loved it. I love how it sounded, and I love what it did in a band, because it was always, for me, it reflects what I think my personality is in a lot of ways. It is not flashy. It is not like the focus of attention, but it is the thing that you notice is missing.
Right.
In first, you'll be like, same missing from there. And the bass is what is like the glue in a model, is the cement in a house. Is without that, nothing makes sense. It can't stay together. The connection between the rhythm and the harmony, you don't know what chord you're playing unless the bass plays.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I never really, what's the interesting about the bass, that I never actually went through the process of learning the basics. I picked up a bass and I started playing it. I've practiced it a lot and I've developed, you know, hopefully good skills and whatnot. But the actual basics of it, I knew instinctively. So I knew how to pick it. When I picked it up, I knew what I was playing from the first day.
Interesting.
And I knew that this instrument was the one that I was going to express myself on the most throughout my life, you know. And it has been very kind to me, you know, because I've been able to do so much with it, you know, and because of it, I'm eternally grateful.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a bassist as well.
Right. More power to you, brother.
So I share the love. I get it. And I think that's interesting because I think it's so important to have those little things at even such an early age. Because I have a similar experience. Maybe I may not have been as skilled in terms of picking out melodies, but I had that tiny toy keyboard too, you know?
Right,
and I had that same inquisitiveness, you know, just picking out notes and having fun with it. So I always ask this question at the beginning of these conversations, because I'm very intrigued by how musicians tend to have some of these similar origin stories, and you have this music in you that begins to come out from an early age.
Yeah. Well, I mean, music is, for people who are born to play music, you learn to hone your skills, but the music is already there. It's like you're born with it. You can hear it. You can feel it. So you really just have to develop the skills to express it. Yeah. You know, it is much like any other language in a sense. Humans are born with all of their emotions and all of their perspectives. You know, that's what you're born with. You have to learn how to express them, right? You learn words and you learn actions and you learn expressions, and You learn all that, but what you're learning to express, you already have.
Absolutely.
And music is much like that. It is another sense. Is this, and the beauty about music for me has always been that I came into music from an instrumental perspective. I always felt that if you made a piece of music the right way, you did not need lyrics.
That's an interesting take.
I've always felt that, right? And the beauty about that for me also is that because if you're not using lyrics, you give the listener a chance to be more interactive in the piece of music, because they then can not be guided by what the person is saying so much, and can just kind of find their own space in the piece of music, and it will mean something different to them. And I've always felt that way about instrumental music, and I've always wanted to develop that alongside my working with singers, because I was there. But if it's like when you put lyrics on a song, sometimes it's like, so that's paint by numbers. It's like, but why do we need to say that at all? If the piece of music is good enough and it is expressive enough, then we should be able to just leave it, But then the singers won't have to work, so you can't do that. But I've always felt that way, and so my approach to music has always been to find a way to express myself that the communication is clear without using words.
Right. That's very powerful. I remember sometime last year, I was here in the green room with Isabella Burnham. Yeah.
Izzy?
Yeah, Izzy. She and I were talking, and she was really thanking you. And there's another name that doesn't come to mind right now, but she mentioned your name as one of the people that helped mentor her, and someone who has been giving back to many of the young musicians in Barbados. How did you pivot to mentoring and teaching? To what degree?
That's an interesting question, because I don't see myself as that. What I think is, I believe in the community of musicians. I believe in the universality of knowledge. Right. So I have learned a lot from the people that came before me. And in my mind, it's like a relay, right? So when you take the baton, you carry it so far, and you hand it, you got to keep handing it. Not that you stop in your race, but you have to give the tools to somebody else, and I find that I learn from them in the same way that they learn from me, because they are growing up, even though we're in the same space, we're in a different time. So they are at a different stage of their life, a different stage of their development. And what their main influences are not mine. When I was at their stage, they weren't alive. So even though we're in the same space, we have a completely different set of influences. And the way that they perceive things is always of interest to me, because it helps me to kind of work out how to adjust how I communicate. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not communicating to anybody, if nobody's understanding what I'm communicating, then I'm not communicating, right? So I try to, the exchanges that we have, like between myself and what we would call the younger musicians, is always an exchange. It is never like, okay, so you do this and you do this and you do this. I would start off by saying, this is what I did. And this is why I did it. because of this set of circumstances.
Yeah.
So you now are in a different set of circumstances, but there is a overall perspective that I may have had that can help you.
Right.
I don't want you to do what I did. If you come into a session and you say, Nicholas, show me how you did this, or show me I want to do that, I'm not showing you that. I am telling you, I will explain to you how I arrived at it,
Right.
or I will explain to you why I did it. But I don't want you to think of that as the end. I want you to think of that as the beginning. So you take your tools and you make your statement, and then I can hear you and say, wow, I didn't even think of that. And then it will send me now into an inspirational moment, and I will then come back with something else. But if you just give me back what I gave you, then you haven't added. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I really, really like interfacing with younger musicians who are interested in music. I'm not talking about people who just want to be glamorous and, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are interested in music and its history and its development and what it has meant and why it has meant what it has meant, and how we can continue to, make it relevant and make it impactful and important from not just a financial or an entertainment perspective, but from a social, cultural, and historical perspective.
Yeah. No, I think that's very wise. I remember I was watching something or listening to a podcast, something along those lines, not too long ago, and they were speaking to Kirk Franklin, or someone who had been talking to him, asked him how he stayed relevant and current as an artist, because he's been around for a long, long time. And he mentioned that, that's what he does, exactly what you just said. He brings in talented young musicians, he listens to them, they listen to him, and he always keeps evolving. And I think that's important, not just in music, but in life in general, for people to continue to evolve and keep getting better and changing and learning all the time.
Yeah, well, it's important because, you can't get caught in the mode of expression. You have to get past the mode of expression and think about what is being expressed, right? So I remember, and it's important to think about the little things in life that impact you and think about how those things would impact somebody else. The kind of technological advances that are happening now were not happening when I was a teenager.
Right.
So when I was a teenager, the drum machine was just coming into vogue. Synthesizers were just becoming accessible to everyone, because prior to that, they were very expensive and it'd be a whole room of wires and things. And man, you couldn't afford it. There's only the people with money that could afford it. But particularly from the point of view of bass, the bass guitar as a legitimate instrument is between 50 and 60 years old.
Right.
It's not an old instrument. Before that, the acoustic bass, what people call the double bass.
Right. Or upright bass.
Upright bass, all of them names there.
Yeah.
That was the standard instrument, right? In everything. In classical music, in jazz, in pop, whatever it was, that is what people played, right? The electric bass came along and changed the dynamic from a point of view of volume first and foremost, because it allowed people to hear the instrument now in a bigger venue, because people were starting to play in bigger venues that were not designed specifically for music. So it wasn't a concert hall. You may be in a sports hall or some kind of, venue that you can't hear an acoustic bass. You can't hear it, right?
Right.
So, but the point I'm trying to make is that musicians then began to experiment with that instrument and carry it to places where the double bass could not go. So, for example, people like in the 70s and 80s, people like Larry Graham and Jaco Pastorius, Stanley Clarke. I can't think of anybody else right now, but those three people in particular approach the instrument from the perspective of a guitar as opposed to a bass, right?
All right.
Now, the whole point of that story is that I was more influenced by them initially than I was by the acoustic players from the past, for obvious reasons, because I was young and they were the glamour guys and they were like playing all this thing. I was like, wow, I want to do that. But when I started to play jazz, the people who call themselves jazz purists told me that because I was not playing an acoustic upright bass, I was not playing jazz, right? So what they had been caught up in, I mean, I'm not saying that they're right or wrong, but what they're caught up in is the mode of expression and not what is being expressed, right?
Right.
So they are caught up in the rules of the game as opposed to what the game is.
Exactly.
Right? And so when I am talking to musicians who are younger than I am not telling you, I'm not even going to start to say that you need to approach it the way that I do. I want you to think about how a bass fits in the pop music of today, because bass has challenges fitting into the pop music of today, you know, because you have 808 bass and you got all kinds of subs and all kinds of things that you don't need to have a bass guitar anymore. So if you love the instrument, how are you going to make it relevant? That is your challenge, right? What are you going to do to make it that the people who feel they don't need it have to get it? Because it's like, listen, I can't get that from anywhere else, right? So that is the kind of conversation that we have. So I would say, you know, the same way that we made the bass guitar relevant before, you now have to find a way to make it relevant now in the context of what the mode of expression is, you know. So those kind of interactions make it exciting for me.
Okay. Now, very quickly, I remember when you were giving the introduction, you mentioned that you were classically trained, right, from the ground up. So I'm just wondering what schools or resources were available at the time, and how does that compare to what is available in Barbados now?
Well, I went to private piano lessons. I never did music at school. Okay. As contradictory as or surprising as that may sound, I never did music at school officially. I went to private piano lessons with it. At first, my first teacher, she took me to grade 5, and she said she didn't have the resources to carry me to grade 8. Okay. So then I had to switch teachers, and I went to somebody else who took me to grade 8. All of the other musical development that I did on my own. Okay. So I learned by listening and studying, analyzing, and using the information in a way that was, I think, trying to put my voice into it. There is much more educational assistance for musicians in Barbados now. We have, for example, the community college has a diploma in music. Now you can do a 2-year course and get a diploma. The University of the West Indies now has a degree in music that you can get. They started that year before last. Okay. And then most schools, secondary schools, have a music department. And, you know, they have teachers, and they don't have as much resources as they should. They don't have a lot of instruments and stuff, but they do have, every school has a music department. And so if you want to learn music in Barbados now, you can. What I find a bit problematic is that the more access people have to the information, the less they seem to value it, and the less they seem to dig in to get to the meat of the matter. You know, they kind of just, well, I know I could do that. I could get that another time, or I could, you know, what I mean, I don't worry about that now. But we, you don't really, you know, that's not how you get better. But I think that people like myself, musicians who are actually functioning professionally full-time, have a great responsibility not only to mentor and, you know, interact with musicians, but we need to show how important it is to be good at what you do to last in the business, right? Because if they don't have those kinds of examples, then it's difficult to motivate them. It's difficult to make them feel like there's a reason to do it. So I think what I try to do is to keep setting an example, and hopefully that will make people think differently when they go to school, because they'll be like, I want to get to that level. I want to get to where they are. I don't, you know what I mean? Because most people don't practice. I went and taught a school the other day, and I said, the first thing I said is, so how many people in here practice every day? And out of the 150 people in the room, maybe 10 people put up their hand. And I said, okay, so how many people in here have a cell phone? Everybody's hand right up. And how many people in here use their cell phone for at least an hour every day? Everybody's hand was up. I said, well, then you see, you can't tell me that you don't have the time. What you don't have is the interest, right? Because you're in this room not because you're good at using your cell phone. You're in this room because you want to be a musician, right? They had a guy that told me, I don't practice because I'm a singer. I said, but that don't make no sense, brother. If you're a singer, you have an instrument. You have skills to develop the same way. It's nothing that, I mean, it's not just because you sing that you know how to practice, you know? So the resources are there, but we need to guide the minds in a particular way.
Okay. And I like the sound of that, because too often, as I speak to musicians around the region, it seems like the right infrastructure isn't in place for learning and to provide learning to young musicians. And it's a topic close to my heart, because growing up, when I myself was somewhere around 12 to 13 years old, you know, I wanted formal training, you know, and I couldn't get there, you know. So,
right. But you know, the truth is, a lot of the musicians that I meet internationally, some of them went to music school. A lot of them didn't finish. The church is a great school for music now. And a lot of the musicians from my generation got skills from playing every night. They were gigging all the time. So you had to develop certain skills. Now, that type of environment doesn't really exist. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're waiting for a formal setup to make you a good musician, you are in for a long way. You know what I mean? There has to, your own interest is what is going to have to guide you.
Right.
You know, and it is not going to, in some cases, you feel like giving up. I mean, to get to the point where you want to get. You know, I mean, what I used to do when I wanted to learn to play bass, I didn't have a computer with software that I could record onto. But at them days, you were using cassettes, you know? So what I used to do, I had 2 cassette players, and I would play the music from one, and then I would sit near with my bass to the next one and record myself playing along with the song on the other cassette player. This is just through the air. This is not with cables or anything, just 2 cassette players. And then I would listen back to myself. And I'd be like, okay, I could hear where I wasn't really playing in time, or my intonation wasn't correct, or my note lengths were wrong. And I would do it again. And I would do it again. And I would do it again and again until I could hear it. And I'd be like, okay, right. See now, I'm getting it. And it is, in that sense, it is like any other profession, you know. I mean, you think about the kind of training that doctors go through in them years before they can actually get access to the public. You know what I mean? It's hours and hours and hours of doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, you think about sports people, you know, athletes who, you know, over and over. This is something that we all have to do. And you have to be prepared to do that, whether there's a formal environment or not. You have to be prepared to say, well, look, I can sit down and do this and listen to it and be objective. Don't let your family tell you, oh, because you know your family's going to say, oh, well, that's the best thing. And you're going to hear my son or my daughter. I said, no, that's not what we're talking about. Right. Be honest. Find somebody that's going to be honest.
All right.
I said, listen to this. And they'll tell you, right, you should go fix this, fix that. And you go and fix it. Come back again. You know? Find ways.
You have to have a thick skin, right?
Oh, yeah. You have to have a thick skin in life, bro.
Yeah. Now, by the way, congratulations on the Bajan Republic status. I was looking at the ceremony. Yeah.
Barbados is amazing that we think of Barbados as, the rest of the Caribbean has always seen Barbados as like Little England kind of, you know. But we really, between the Caribbean Court of Justice and Republic status, I think we are really the only Caribbean island so far that is showing its commitment to the region from a political standpoint, at least.
Right.
I don't know what the rest waiting on, but we're moving.
It makes sense from the political front in that I believe Mia Motley is the head of the CSME, or she's sort of in charge of the implementation of the Caribbean single market and economy.
Well, that is how that revolves between leaders, you know. But I mean, the Caribbean Court of Justice has been set up in Trinidad now for 10, 15 years, and is in Trinidad, and Trinidad ain't signed on to it yet. Which don't make no sense to me. To me, it shouldn't be there at all.
Right.
In my mind, you shouldn't be getting benefit from it if you're not using it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Change is slow in that way. But one thing I wanted to push into is I saw you performing at the ceremony. So I want to speak a little bit to performance, right? I saw you performing there with your band. You had your bass and you were locked in. And it makes me wonder what advice you might have for musicians across the region in terms of performance and, expressing your sound on stage.
There's so many different things you could say, but first thing is you got to make sure that your instrument is in good shape. And you have to understand what your instrument's role is.
Right.
In a live context. Because you're playing a bass does not mean that you have to turn up all the bass on the bass. You know?
Yeah.
Or because you're playing a guitar, you got to turn up all the treble. You know, you have to find where you fit in the space. And you have to make sure that what you are doing on stage is making the music sound as it is supposed to sound. You are not on the stage to show off. You are not on the stage to make people watch you. You are on the stage for the band. It is the most democratic space there is. And the role of everyone is to make everyone become one. So in the confidence that you use as a musician to express yourself on the stage, you still have to be aware of how humble you have to be part of this group. And I also would say that it is important that people can feel that you love what you're doing. Okay. That is something that you actually have to kind of practice in a way, because if you are thinking too much about what you are doing, then you look like you are under pressure. Right. So you have to get to the point where what you are doing is coming naturally from you through practice and through development. So that when you actually get on the stage and you're performing, you can enjoy yourself and know that you know what you are doing and you know what is going to happen next, and you could control your contribution to that. So you can then relax and enjoy yourself. If you are worried about what is coming next and you're thinking about what is coming next and you're not sure, then the audience knows it.
They can feel it.
The audience does not know what they know, but they know it instinctively. The sign right up there, I ain't feeling it. So the basics, when put together, make a good performance. And make sure that you rehearse properly. I ain't talking about running through a song once and yeah, we got that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about understanding that even if you are learning a song that has already been, if you're covering a song, think about your band, think about what your instrumentation is, think about who is in the band, and find a way to make that song work with the configuration that you have. So that even though people may hear something that they know, they're hearing it in a different way. They're hearing it in a way that's unique to you. Mm-hmm. And it's not some synthetic sounding attempt to do something that is not coming from your spirit, All right. That's enough?
No, absolutely. I think that's very good. I think that's very good. And I think those are some of the key principles of performance that many people tend to miss, especially in the early stages of their careers. Yeah. I also want to pivot now to what you were saying at the beginning of the episode here. I promise you would get back to this because I'm very intrigued in this. Where you mentioned that, one of the things that you currently have a passion for is ensuring that Caribbean music covers the full spectrum of emotion, right? Can you tell me a little bit about when you began thinking about this and what's your current progress in that sense?
Well, I have always felt that there was certain aspects of who I am as a person that I could not find existing music that allowed me to feel connected in that part of my person. So to a large extent, outside of certain, it's not 100% this, but to a large extent, our music, particularly in the Southern Caribbean, is very celebratory, right, or it is very political.
Okay.
Right? We're talking about subject matter now. It is very celebratory, it is political, or is religious. Mm-hmm. Those are the three things that tend to guide how people express themselves to a large extent. There's a lot of, so like the example I used to you earlier is that if, I have never really heard a person, when people are dead, you hear Michael Jackson gone too soon. When you go to weddings, you hear Luther Vandross here and now. And I'm saying, well, okay, so we have, I mean, millions of songs, and you can't think of one song from this vast catalog of Caribbean music that says what Here and Now says to you, or that says what Gone Too Soon says, or whatever it is. And so I have always tried to make music that I felt went in between the cracks. So, for example, when I first started working with Crossfire, and I was working with Edwin separately, I was working with the band, but I was also working with Edwin as a solo artist. And we had done a set of like slower calypsos. Well, I didn't even want to call them calypsos because it's just Caribbean music. Let's call it that. And dealing with subjects about, you know, like when you're feeling the kind of mental stress that you go through sometimes in life when you're not sure of who you are or where you're going. And, you know, you have crises of faith and character. You know, those types of issues, we try to deal with them in a way that was attractive but specific to us. Yeah. So I've always felt more challenged by that. I love the celebrating. I love to see Caribbean people, you know, the idea of being able to put your hand in the air and feel like, yeah, this is us. I love that. But that's not all we are. And I feel like we are losing more of the breadth of our expression, because we are allowing ourselves to get caught up in these small avenues for visibility.
Okay.
The music that we hear at carnivals now is much more one-dimensional than it used to be. You know, okay, so I know you want party, and I know you want drink, and I know you want dance, and I know that. But you don't have to tell me that in every song. You know what I mean? Right. I am not saying that I don't want to hear it in a song or two, but I can't see why a whole night that is all you're going to say to me. Right. About what we're going to do in this party and what she had on and what he did to her and what we drank. Okay, so that's not what we're all about. You know, I think, and then too, I find once you get 4 or 8 bars that grooving, man, people are happy. And they will say, okay, we can just loop that for the next 2 minutes. Right. And I am like, well, okay, so it's a nice groove. But at some point, you have to know that the person that is listening needs saying. You know, they don't know that they need it, but they need it. They need it to go somewhere. Right. It needs to, you know, it needs to develop. It needs to have a contour. It has to have a shape, right? And I think we are losing that depth. You know, so I can't say that I'm succeeding, but it's a beautiful challenge to have where I'm, you know, trying to counterbalance things in a way that I think works for me, because that is what all musicians should be trying to do. You can't criticize a thing or disagree. Let's say not, I don't want to say criticize. You disagree with somebody else's statement and then you just say disagree. That's nonsense. You can't do that. You have to then say, well, I disagree because, and this is what I think it should be.
All right, you have to be solution-oriented.
Right, you're having a conversation through creation, because that is what it is, right? Yeah, you have to. I have to counterbalance. I have to say, well, this is my vision on that, and then you say, well, okay, hey, that's true. Here for this, and you keep going as opposed to talking. Let me just make the thing. So it's about trying also to create a body of work that I have this idea of being able to go anywhere in the world with a Caribbean Symphony Orchestra and playing quality music that is from here.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's not like we ain't going out there to play Bach and Beethoven. That's not what we going out there to do. But we're going out there to play equivalent music,
right?
But expressed, created here. You know what I mean? So
I'm bought in. I'm all in on that. That sounds good to me.
To me, that's what it's about, you know, because in my mind, the Caribbean is so vibrant and so creative. It's almost to the point that it is too creative, so it doesn't respect itself, because we don't value our creative ability because it feels too easy. Yeah. Because it's like we just, it's so much comes naturally.
Yeah, it's normal to us.
You know what I mean? But if you think about how the rest of the world is struggling to express itself, you know what I mean? Artistically in so many different ways, and how much of what we create they're using for themselves, you know, and we're not using it. I mean, it's like, it feels weird. So I feel like that is my dream, to create music from the Caribbean, by people from the Caribbean, that expresses who we are in the fullest way. You understand?
Yeah, that's powerful. I'm excited to hear the work. I'm excited to hear the direction that you take. As I said, I'm completely bought into that. I think that's powerful. I don't know if you have to go, because we did have a bit of a conflict with our scheduling. So
I have to go soon.
Okay. So since you do have to go soon, we'll wrap this up with just imagine with me right now that seated in front of us, we have all of the region's musicians, right?
All of them?
Yeah, all of them. We're talking thousands of people, from guitarists to percussionists and drummers, and everybody's here with us right now. Right. What would you tell them, and what would you leave with us as you walk out of the door here?
I would say to you all, to us all, we are the most potent force for expression and exportation of the Caribbean spirit in the Caribbean. We are that. And it is incumbent upon us to carry that to the world in the most respectful and responsible way. And I also want to say that we need to keep thinking about how we hone our musical vocabulary. So, yes, you can embrace influences from elsewhere. Yes, you can study what everybody else in the world is doing, but don't give it back to them the way that they sent it. You have to take it and say, okay, right, well, I like that, but this is how we can do it, and give it back to you in a way that you then like, oh Lord, I didn't expect that at all. You know, we have that power, and it is up to us to represent our people in the music sphere to the rest of the world. It is up to us. And our job is to make sure that we do it in a way that it lasts and that it makes us a long-term viable musical force on the planet.
Okay. That's very well said.
Practice all the time.
Right. Very well said, and thank you so much for joining me here in the green room. I appreciate your patience and your understanding. And
thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Folks, you'll see us again in next month. See you guys. Bye.
All right.